Part 7. There Was a Man. The Saga of Gordon Kahl. A True Story. Page 43, Chapter 8, Memories. By talking to Grandma, I learned some interesting things about my grandpa. The federal agents were not finished in their pursuit of Grandpa after his release from prison. Not by a long shot. Grandpa must have been elated indeed as he approached Heaton in the summer of '79, following his release. The big sky covering the endless fields of grain, gently undulating from the prairie breeze, is a magnificent sight in August. His memories, recollected then, were those God gave him, so that he may have bouquets in his life's autumn. The cute little prairie dogs along the roadside appeared as old friends, as did the birds of prey effortlessly circling over the fields. "Been gone a while," a neighbor said. "Yeah, I've been visiting one of your kinfolks down in Kansas, Uncle Sam." Gordon responded wryly, which was his nature. "I'll never go back, though." Heaton is a central North Dakota. Heaton is in central North Dakota, 2 miles north of Highway 52 and 3 miles from the homestead. A grain elevator, Prairie Cathedral, is the predominant building, but like many others, has not operated for several years. A service station that stays open part-time and a post office are the only businesses. The tavern building has been converted into the Heaton Bible Church. Grandpa got a taste of federal operations here back in 1952. He applied for a mail carrier's job and scored 95 on the exam. The next highest score was 69. The kicker was that neither of them got the job, awarded to the third man down the list. The Kahls were not the kind to go to social functions much. They preferred to stay home, but company was welcome. With Grandpa on the piano and his brother-in-law on strings, song and dance time was fun for all. Gordon later expressed how his thoughts went back to bygone days during those peaceful days at summer's end. His reverie included the joyful trip made to Montana with their friend and physician Clarence Martin and his wife in 1977. He remembered his love for hunting and conservation. Smugly grinning to himself, he recalled that when others were just talking about ecology, he was planning habitat around his fields for the wildlife. He possessed a reverence for life which few can comprehend, very likely stemming from the war years when he was wounded at least twice. I imagine he conjured visions of his childhood. Given his dry sense of humor, I remember him telling stories on himself when he was in grade school. "You may not believe it," he would begin, "but I've been short all my life. I was 4 years old before my legs were long enough to walk. When I started school, the teacher marked me only half present. She told the class to rise, then told me directly to stand up. 'But I am standing,' she'd reply. 'But I am standing,' she'd reply, 'then stand on a book.' When she said it was my turn to read aloud, I told her I'd like to, but I'm standing on my book." His years of farming together with his neighbor, Arlie Barkell, were fond recollections, as were his labors for Herman Whitaker, a large-scale farmer and a church elder near Bowdoin. These were dear family friends. He felt sincere appreciation for these families in helping the Kahls over financial tight spots and in assisting with the children. After Gordon's death, Herman Whitaker wrote this about Gordon. "It was right after World War II that we got to know Gordon Kahl. He came to Bowdoin and worked in the International Machine Shop as a mechanic. He was a top mechanic and did quite a bit of work for me. He always had a pleasant attitude and we became good friends. We became better acquainted after he started farming a few years later. We would exchange work and machinery, and this went on for a number of years. He loved the out of doors and believed in wildlife conservation. He told of a time in the Army when they were camped in North Africa during the war in a makeshift base where they did not have any electricity. He loved to visit and reminisce. Gordon used his ingenuity by finding an old motor and a generator on the base. He hooked the two up, and the camp then had electricity while they were there. He liked to work with electricity. One time Gordon was working on a piece of machinery in the yard when a little 4-year-old girl came riding around with her tricycle. She circled him and the machine several times, coming a little closer each time. He warned her to stay away, but finally she cut the corner too close and knocked down the props where he was working. Thereupon he took command of her, warmed her bottom, and she came into the house and told her mother. "That Gordon is sure Snoopy," Arlie smiled. Gordon was always willing to do a favor for his friends and neighbors. He was honest, kind, and a wonderful Christian. One pleasant memory was when Yori was 6 years old. Gordon was combining grain. Joan was driving the grain truck, but left it and Yori in the field while she attended to some matters at the house. When rain threatened, she observed the truck, apparently with no driver, coming slowly towards the house. Upon its arrival it stopped, and she ran to it. There was Yori, barely able to see over the dash. "I did it just like Dad showed me," he blurted. Joan nearly went into shock. Yori idolized his dad, in actions and beliefs. Yori was a mirror image of his father. Grandpa's thoughts were often on his children and 6 grandchildren. Linda had us 2 girls, Thompsons. Yori and Janice had 3 children, but were getting their family started then. Lorene married Charles Dick, the son of Peter Dick, who preached at Grandpa's funeral. Fred married Claudette. They lived in Texas, as do Lorna and Phil Adkins. He pondered the long hours he spent over the years. Sometimes at it all night studying the Bible, the Constitution, and the government. There were no regrets. He had the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. He realized his battle was not really with flesh and blood, but with powers and principalities of the air, as Paul the Apostle had taught. One Sunday afternoon, I heard Grandpa prophetically explain to Grandma that the Federals, the alien sons of Satan, would get him sooner or later. If he had to leave in order to prevent this, she should not expect to ever see him again. His final assurance was, "But don't worry." Chapter 9, let me just spell it, Colloquy. You're searching to find out what happened, aren't you? I guess looking for answers is a good way to find them. The newspaper reporter then came in from the porch. "Do you want to ask Grandma some questions? Go ahead. Her name is Joan, and she's in the kitchen." "Sure, I'll talk with you," said Miss Kahl. Question: Did Gordon contact his probation supervisor? Answer: He just ignored the probation since he didn't think it was legal. The probation officer did come to the house once. Seems that his name was Bob Holliday from Bismarck. I served him coffee and cake, and we were nice to him. Gordon left no doubt, however, that he would not go back to prison for income tax matters. "You must sign one of these forms and send it in," Bob informed him. "Give me the whole stack," Gordon retorted. "I'll sign all of them now." "I'm not going to fill them out anyways. Just sign them." "Can't do that," Holliday responded and departed. Question: When did he come back? Answer: He never did. He would stick the forms in the mailbox, but Gordon just threw them away. We were as nice to him as we could be, but he had a terrible fear of Gordon, which he later spread to others. This caused retired Marshal Bud Warren to remark later, "Here was a U.S. probation officer, a federal agent, authorized to carry a firearm and use it in self-defense, authorized to make arrests, supported by the Department of Justice and the courts, acting like a scared kid." Question: Did you stay in North Dakota that winter? Answer: Yes, we did. Everything was relatively quiet and peaceful until the next summer, 1980. Question: What happened then? Answer: The probation officer must have reported Gordon for not furnishing a copy of his '79 tax return. He probably didn't bother to check and see if Gordon had income sufficient to require him to file, being as he was in prison most of '79. This would have been around May 20. Then, on July the 2nd, the court in Texas wrote an order of issuance of summons with a show cause hearing set for noon, August the 20th. The summons was sent to North Dakota on July the 15th, and Deputy Marshal Dean of Minot served the summons. Gordon firmly told the marshals at the time that he was not going to appear. The summons was quickly returned to the court, in Texas and the refusal notation. Gordon's signature had been forged on the summons document. On July 21st, 1980, the government's attorney down there filed a motion of revocation of probation. It charged that he had not furnished the probation office with a copy of his '79 tax return. That previous week, the Terrells had written the court saying they were no longer Gordon's attorneys. One day during this time, a deputy sheriff from Fessenden came out of Whitaker's looking for Gordon. 2 marshals were with him. Herman told them, "Leave Gordon alone. He isn't hurting anyone." A few days later, they came to the house. The sheriff came this time. Gordon told them that he would like to educate them and also politely told them not to come back otherwise. They were not interested in talking and hurried off. The sheriff couldn't leave quickly enough. Gordon always said he'd never go looking for them, but if they came looking for him, he would not back off. He said they had no jurisdiction over him. Question: whatever came of the application to revoke parole? Answer: the government withdrew it the next month. The court issued an order by Judge Burton this time, not subtle, allowing the U.S. Attorney to withdraw the motion. This was on September the 21st. I think Reverend Dick and Martha Geyer may have used some influence to get this done. In any event, the Kahl case had been over and done with at this point. This was just the beginning of the government's cat-and-mouse game with Gordon. Question: he never did anything to rile them after that? Answer: of course not. He always carried his rifle with him, but he was an avid hunter and had done that for years, just like a lot of other men. He didn't carry it on the streets or into stores, though. Question: where did the probation go from there? Answer: the following year, the court issued an order for issuance of arrest warrant to show cause why probation should not be revoked. Maybe the empty call folder in the hands of the probation officer was getting to be an embarrassment to the cowardly Bob Holliday, and he requested the revocation. However, those who know how IRS operates don't think it was just that simple. The warrant was issued on March the 30th, just before filing time. The IRS likes to make a big publicity splash, and arresting a tax protester would help terrorize any who are tempted not to file or who are wavering. Criminal tax prosecutions are much more frequent during the first quarter of any year. Just check the newspapers and see for yourself. The warrant issued may not have been valid. It was not issued to anyone. A notation at the bottom of the form says it can be issued to any U.S. Marshal or to any FBI agent. The space was not completed, left blank, so maybe no one officially authorized to arrest Gordon. Notification of the warrant was sent to Marshal Harold Warren in Fargo, North Dakota for execution. According to the stamped date, the warrant signed by Deputy Clerk was not received by the North Dakota District until June 26, 1982, 16 months later. Prior to that, they had facsimiles. This warrant was returned by others to the court after Gordon was killed, marked unexecuted in June 1983, a yellowed document. Question: did action pick up after that? Answer: I should say so. For instance, we were in Harvey on Mother's Day in May of 1981. We heard by the grapevine that the Harvey and Fessenden police were spreading word that a SWAT team was coming out to our farm and blow us away. So on May the 11th, Gordon decided to go away alone. I learned later how destructive a SWAT team can be. He wouldn't tell me where he was going, explaining, "If you don't know where I'm going, you don't have to lie to them when they ask." I couldn't believe they would do that to us. But Gordon said seriously, "Nothing is beneath those people if they are really going to do it to get me. I don't want to endanger you and Lorene." They could have arrested Gordon any day. He had not been in hiding. He was often on the streets and in the stores, unarmed. What's more, the Federals knew every move he made, knew his habits and all about him. After he left, Federal agents soon checked out our farm and determined that he was not here. Question: you've got a lot of grit for a girl, but didn't that put quite a burden on you? Answer: yes, I was doing the best I could in mowing yards, weeding the garden, and taking care of the chickens. Then one day in mid-July, when I was having all kinds of trouble with the water system, the kitchen door opened and in walked Gordon. I was so happy he came home, and just in time to fix the water system. Gordon could fix anything mechanical, and he was so courteous and considerate. During the following weeks, we gathered our garden, gave much of it away, and canned the vegetables and chickens for the winter. Question. There's nothing so strong as a woman's apron strings to tie a man down. One more question. Any comments? Yet answer. Yes, I have. Gordon always thought he was so alone, especially up here. If he had known of the thousands of Christian patriotic supporters he had all over this country, it would have made it so much easier on him. I just wish he had known. Chapter 10. Keystone Cops. I began to collect data and discuss events which would tell the real story of my mentor. I did not want our family and friends to remember Grandpa with a few tidbits of bad publicity. A magazine reporter who seemed to be enamored with my company spent a quiet afternoon absorbing the summer sunshine and relating events. His song voice seemed to keep time with the swaying creaking of the yard swing. He told me about his interview with a North Dakota U.S. Marshal. Harold Bud Warren was the marshal in Fargo at the time the warrant was issued. He was the appointee of President Carter. Deputy marshals are under civil service. Myatt Meyer explained to me. Upon receiving the warrant in early April 1981, Warren's days as marshal were numbered, and since President Carter left office in January. Being only 2 years away from retirement at the time, this posed a problem. He accepted the appointment, presuming Carter would be reelected. His civil service status was forfeited when he accepted the marshal's position. Part of Bud's problem in Fargo was because he was a Democrat, but not the kind Will Rogers had in mind when he said, "I pretend to be a Democrat because they're funny and I try to be." Bud's tenure had been polemic up to then. The two Republican federal judges had initiated secret investigation of him as chief marshal, with the charge being general mismanagement. Warren sued them, and a federal judge in Washington ruled the case. No specific accusations were in evidence, and no wrongdoing could be found. One of the problems was that Bud ran the office by the book, as an agency of the Justice Department and within the executive branch of the federal government, not as an adjunct to the federal courts within the judicial branch, as perhaps the federal judges would have preferred. He insisted that the deputy marshals perform only the law enforcement duties clearly specified for them to do, not court bailiffs or court jesters. Bud Warren, though soft-spoken, makes a striking presence. He impresses one as having the physique of a 250-pound Chicago Bears linebacker and equally as fearless and confident. His actions in the Kahl matter proved that his wisdom matched his other good traits. He tended to follow Andrew Jackson's admonition. Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action arrives, go in. Here's what the Marshal Warren has to say. I received the warrant in early April and surmised it was comparable to a DUI charge. Nothing urgent. Time was on our side. The assistant probation officer in Bismarck called me saying that he had initiated the warrant from Texas because Kahl had not mailed in his monthly reports. I'm so scared of him I won't go out there anymore, he blurted, adding the probation violation of Gordon Kahl is a very touchy situation. You had better use a lot of caution when you try to apprehend him. All right, I'll send it to Minot and let them investigate it. They checked into the matter. They reported that citizens were of the opinion that Gordon Kahl would shoot you if you tried to serve it. I decided to handle it myself. To obtain all the pertinent information, I called the probation office and then I called the sheriff, who said, I don't have any trouble with him, but I understand he can be dangerous. Gordon had let it be known that he was not about to be arrested and returned to Texas peaceably. So I called Gordon Kahl to get to the bottom of it. I sent a couple of fellows out, Dean and Wigglesworth, and they got run off. No, they didn't get run off. They were nicely told they were not going to be welcome, and they took that very seriously and went back to Minot. They were all wind and no weather. I'd like to come out and talk with you. I don't think we have anything to talk about. Well, we've got a warrant for a probation violation. People are very sensitive about discussing the situation concerning you because they're afraid of what might happen. We could talk about that. You don't have to worry about violence. There will be no violence. I wouldn't hurt anybody. I wouldn't even shoot a jackrabbit unless it was to feed my dog, Gordon responded. I'd like to come out and talk, maybe tonight. Okay? But we have church in Heaton tonight. How about tomorrow? You'll have to come alone and come unarmed. That's no problem. And it'll have to be where I say. Okay, no problem. We'll meet at the neighbor's house and I'll have some friends along. Fine, I have no problem with that. Grandpa would as lief visit a bull buffalo, but he was always good for his word. Having a mugshot, I decided to drive out that same day to survey the area. I picked up Pete, a friend in Jamestown, formerly a sheriff, to go with me. In Heaton, 3 or 4 cars were parked in front of a building. Leaning against the corner of the building was a little guy wearing a baseball cap with an IH monogram pulled down over one eye. He had a big smile watching us go by. I thought, this can't be the man. I had a big, tough-looking guy in mind. Pete asked, do you see him? I've seen a man that fits the picture. We went back but by then Kahl was in his car. If I hadn't been so astounded by his meek appearance, I could have arrested him before he went to his car. I said, there's no way now we'll be able to take Gordon Kahl tonight, as he carries a rifle in his car, and I think he has made us. We then encountered the preacher down the street at the service station, who asked, any problems? No problems. We're state engineers looking for a place for the crew to eat and whatever. He just smiled and chuckled. The next morning, after Kahl had verified no construction project was existent, he called me. Were you here last night? Yes. I didn't know it was you, but I knew it was law enforcement officers. We didn't have a deal last night. Our deal is for tonight. Lucky you didn't try it. You mean after you got in the car? Yeah, I had my Mini 14 along. We discussed Mini 14s for the remainder of the conversation. That night I met the minister in Carrington and we drove up to the neighbor's house. Both sides recorded the discussion at Bud Brackle's. The crux of the meeting was that Gordon was determined not to go back to Texas and face that judge. He would voluntarily appear in court, maybe if the case were moved to North Dakota. That should be no problem, I explained with relief. Federal courts are everywhere, and this is where they claim you violated parole. I'll get on it immediately. I suggested an attorney Gordon might contact formally with IRS, who should be unique in expertise. The attorney had represented one of my female employees in a discrimination charge against me, the charge being originated by a federal judge. I informed Kahl that his attorney should contact the federal judge in Bismarck. This judge and I had personnel and political differences, but I thought him to be a compassionate man. I surmised if he could get the feeling of this case, everything should work out all right. Meanwhile, the probation officer had put out word that Kahl was a very dangerous man. Gordon's attorney, not the one I recommended as this did not work out, contacted the judge, who wouldn't see him because of the reports. I approached the U.S. Attorney in Fargo explaining that, in my estimation, Gordon was not dangerous. The attorney responded positively, seeing no problem. 2 days later, the attorney said, I don't know what's going on, but these probation people are scared to death of this case. They just want to get rid of it, sorry. I called Gordon and told him about the report. He responded, that's true. They were out here a couple of times, and we were as nice to them as we could be. Last time it was holiday, and my wife served him refreshments. I made it perfectly clear that I hadn't violated anything, and that they intended to take me to Texas, whether I filed monthly reports or not. So why send them in? The probation officer won't even come into the yard anymore, and we treated him with the utmost respect. The situation thus waxed ridiculous. The Justice Department, the IRS, and the federal judiciary, the whole works, was afraid of this little man. I laughed to myself. Leaving my family here in Fargo in 1967, I had spent 6 to 8 years on the East Coast, working with organized crime. I was one of 7 marshals in the nation selected to establish the witness security, internal investigation, and court security systems. I lived with a man for 18 months who had killed 27 people. Contrast him to Kahl. I lived with a mafia godfather in the New England states. At first I protected others from him, and then him from others. These people would kill for next to no reason at all. Then I came out here and saw all the pusillanimity, and I couldn't believe it was happening. Gordon did have an abnormal mental quirk, I have concluded. He had some unconventional beliefs, but to him they were only beliefs. He had a rigid, closed mind in certain matters. Somewhat disgusted, I called Gordon Kahl and let him know what transpired, and that we had to resolve this thing. I had no doubt that I would do my duty and arrest Gordon. I had brought in a security specialist for the state. We inquired into Gordon's personal and routine habits and needs, such as his shopping and mail habits. We decided for the security agent, a stranger, to be shopping in a certain grocery store which Gordon frequented on a regular basis. I would remain out of sight until we were ready to take him, simply handcuff him with, at most, a mild scuffle. He did not take his rifle into stores. Management of the store was apprised of the plan. Newspapers had picked up on the story of Kahl's warrant, so I knew some action was needed. About a month had passed since receiving the warrant, but I still had no sense of urgency. Gordon trusted me and had told me as much. Before the plan could be implemented, I made a trip to Washington regarding my negotiations to revert to a deputy marshal. If they didn't accept my deal, that would let Kenneth Muir come in now as a temporary judicial appointee, selected by Paul Benson. It would require several months for them to oust me via the Senate confirmation route and federal courts. The bargain was completed on that trip. I was to become deputy marshal assigned to Grand Forks. I briefed Muir on the Kahl case. His response, which was to be the same many times thereafter: "When you were marshal, you did it your way. Now that I'm marshal, we'll do things my way. We're going after Kahl. The store plan was discarded." One of Muir's attempts, in which I was ordered to participate, was for 4 of us to pretend that we were a road survey crew. When Kahl drove by, we were to radio the message to Muir in a vehicle a mile or 2 ahead. "Then we'll take him," Ken said. I protested that we would be on foot with Kahl in a car, and we would only have sidearms. How are we going to take him? He replied with his standard spiel of how we do things his way now. I told him Kahl can smell you a mile away. He doesn't even have to see you. Even if he didn't, he'd know something was amiss when he did observe us. You've got your head up your ass. We went out to the road before daylight, unusual for a road crew, and paced up and down until 1 or 2 o'clock, when Muir discontinued the effort. Kahl didn't come by. We looked ridiculous out there. Another Muir plan, which was never executed, was to pretend we were hunters hunting deer hunting season, and arrest Kahl while he was hunting. And later, of course, was the foolish roadblock resulting in the shootout at Medina. I interrupted. "Would you like some lemonade?" The reporter continued the monologue as he sipped the cool, tangy beverage. All right, I'm going to stop there on the top of page 56. We're going to stop at the top of page 56.